to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us at Secular AZ today. As you all know, white Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to our democracy, and Secular AZ is your voice for the separation of religion and government. We are a nonprofit organization, and we act as your voice to elected officials all across the valley. All across the state and at every level. So be sure to check out all of our social media channels and like, subscribe, and share. Next week, you can join us for a conversation with the League of Women Voters. They're going to join us this year, as they did back in 2022, to talk about this year's ballot initiatives. They are also a nonpartisan organization, and they will be giving us their suggestions. But for today, I am joined by Mark Cable. Mark Cable has been a middle school teacher for 15 years, with 10 of those years teaching the We the People Civics program to 8th grade social studies students. Mark has a BS in Business Administration from Northern Arizona University and a master's in education from Arizona State University. He spent 10 years teaching young people to be active citizens. He discussed the importance of making a well-reasoned argument and the importance of really listening in a respectful way to those who have a different point of view. And if you've taught middle school students, they sometimes need to be taught those skills. But I will say that they're probably better than most people in Congress. His students can do this, but they are then faced with an election system that rewards name calling, hate and fear mongering, and other forms of negative campaigning. How can we ask young people to not be apathetic when they continuously feel like they are forced to choose between the lesser of two evils? We can and should do better. Wow, I love everything in that bio. Is there anything that I missed, Mark?
And not really. You get the main points. I taught for I guess 15 years, and I taught 10 years in middle school. And I loved it. I really truly did. I will tell you that middle schoolers are great, but they will occasionally try your patience. But I did. I ended up taking. I'm off right now, and I got involved in the voter choice. My in-laws became ill, and I needed to take some time off to take care of them. So. They have gone on to better things, good, but I am looking forward to returning. My goal is to return to high school and community college. I love civics and government as an academic subject. I'm working on my master's right now at Ashland University in American History and Government. So my goal is to do that at a higher level full time. Hopefully a little less monitoring of the students, a little more teaching of the students.
My background is actually in education. I started in middle school, went to high school for a little while, and then went back to middle school. And it's true. I mean, I love middle school students. I really do. They're so fun and funny, and they're exploring everything in the best and worst ways. But it's true. In high school, you get to get a little bit deeper into the topic. So I wish you the best with that, and you'll have to keep us posted. So I'm just gonna hand it over to you. I know you've got a presentation, and I will, like I said, please save your questions till the end. If you have a question, by all means, if something enters your head, put it into the chat, and we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. So go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so if everybody's ready, but number one, thank you all for tuning in. I really do appreciate this. My goal today is to give you kind of an educational background here, a little bit on what's something called Final Five voting, and that Final Five involves three different parts. One of which is ranked choice voting, and there's a lot of information and misinformation out there about that subject. So I'm going to ask that you just have an open mind and listen to kind of where I'm going with this. And once I get it all explained, I will absolutely answer any question that you have that I can. Occasionally, people will ask me things that even I haven't thought about or had before. But if that happens, I will tell you. Oh no, that's fine. So let me go ahead and open up my PowerPoint. But before I do that, I'm going to put into the chat really quick, if I can find it here. I'm going to put in a virtual sign-in sheet, and my goal is that this will actually allow you to sign in. Copying the link. And if you are interested in learning more when I'm done, or coming up with more about volunteering for Voter Choice Arizona or working on Final Five or any of those kinds of things, or just, being on our mailing list, I hope you'll sign into that. So I'm going to go ahead and post that now if I can get to everyone. And this should say, I'm just put it up here, working here, virtual, come on, sign in sheet. Boink. And there we go. All right, there it is. So I appreciate it. If you get a chance, you can do that either as I present. If you want to go there and do that and just come back, or you can do that at the end, whatever. But I want to make sure I put it there because if I don't now, I'll forget. All right, let me go ahead and open up and share my screen here and do this. And I'm apparently experiencing some technical difficulties here. Hold on. It worked. If I can't get it to do it, I'll do it old school. One more time. Let me try this. There we go. All right. Gotta love technology. It works right up until it doesn't. And here we go. Share. And then hopefully it'll do it like this. And that'll go. Perfect. All right, there we go. And we're in business. Everybody should be able to see my voter choice fancy title page, and here I'll roll. So here we go. So I already introduced myself, but I'll tell you again a little bit about me. Gene gave me such a great introduction. I'm from Voter Choice, Arizona. Voter Choice is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing about voting reform here in Arizona. Specifically, things called Final Five voting and ranked choice voting, somewhat similar to what's happening in Alaska right now. So I'll go and explain that. I got involved in this. I said, when they mentioned in my introduction that I taught middle school kids for 10 years in civics. And in addition to teaching them the basics of the three parts of government and checks and balances, I wanted them to be able to discuss any issue and to do so in a rational and courteous manner. And believe it or not, I could get them to do that. I don't know how much you know about 13-year-olds and how rational they can be. But, it wasn't always easy, but we could get there. The problem that bothered me is that I could get my kids to do it, but then election time would come around and it would be so negative and so ugly. And the example that was set for my kids was just awful. And I wanted to know, look, there's got to be something. So because I'm a civics sort of geek, I kept looking back and I think about James Madison and checks and balances and the structures built in the Constitution. Okay, so what could we do? And I'm not James Madison. I couldn't figure anything out. And then looking online, I found Voter Choice, and they had a happy hour. And by the way, I think the best way to learn about politics is over alcohol. It certainly makes it less painful. But I went to their meeting, was kind of looking to see if they were rational folks or if this was some weirdo kind of idea. And I met the founder of Voter Choice. His name is Blake Saka. And Blake is a retired chemical engineer. He's not really he's not a politician. And he said to me, and this is what I carry with me, and I want you to catch on. The idea here is, he said, when I was learning to be an engineer, they taught me that bad systems beat good people. I'm going to say that again. Bad systems beat good people. So sometimes what we're talking about here is not good guys and bad guys. You're not going to hear me paint one side or the other as good or bad. That's not what we're about here. We're looking at this from a system approach, that there's a flaw in our system that needs to be corrected, and that we can correct it and we can make it better so it works better for everyone. So let's just keep that in mind. Now, as I run through here, we're going to go some basics here. We believe that a lot of our problems stem from how we elect our representatives. And so some basic review. If you want to be a candidate for the Arizona State Legislature, there's a three-part process you have to go through. One, you have to qualify for the ballot. You need to be able to, and for most people, that means gaining signatures. You've go out and you gather signatures to get on the ballot. Now, if you get enough signatures, you meet the requirement. Then, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you participate in a primary election, which is a partisan election where only Democrats vote for Democrats and only Republicans vote for Republicans. And independents, well, they kind of get left out. I'll go into that in a little bit. Then, as a result of that election, the two winners, usually of the primary election, you guys all know this, go on to the general, and we have the general election where everybody gets to vote. Now, that's the basics, and I want you to keep those three ideas in mind because we're going to talk about a change in each area, okay? So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Now, I want you to put that in the back of your head for just a minute, and I'm going to talk to you about something we don't talk about often, is that Arizona voters actually agree far more than they disagree. And I know that's shocking because when you turn on the news, you will see anything but that. But the truth of the matter is the Center for the Future of Arizona in 2022 did a survey, and they do this survey every year, and they ask some kind of basic questions. They send out, what are Arizonans really interested in? And they came across some surprising findings in these 5 key areas. Now, these are pretty broad, but they found a lot of agreement in these areas. For example, 97% of Arizonans agreed that it's really critically important that we have quality teachers and principals in schools. 97%. That's across the board, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, the whole 9 yards. On immigration, 87% agree that we need to create a functioning border for commerce and immigration. We've got to get it working. Okay? When it comes to water, 95% of Arizonans say, hey, you know what? We need to have a plan to deal with our long-term drought and our long-term water shortages. We have to deal with our water supply in a comprehensive way. Environmentally, we can talk about the idea that 93% of Arizonans agree that we need to be putting large investments and taking steps to prevent forest fires on state lands and mitigating the damage caused by them. Okay? And in the economy, 95% of Arizonans think we need to be doing things that are going to promote long-term growth. 92% say we need to do something that deals with inflation. Okay? So we get some pretty massive majorities there. Now, granted, those are on big picture items, but that's kind of the idea, right? Are these really being addressed? And if you kind of watch the state legislature, it seems like they oftentimes fight about things that are, well, not exactly on this list. And it has a lot more to do with kind of mudslinging and bad-mouthing the other side. So how did we get to that? Why is it we can have such broad agreement in some areas and such massive disagreement and a lack of attention to some of these things? And so that's where we come in. We believe this comes from the fact of how our elections work, and that a small minority of voters decide the vast majority of elections in here in Arizona. For example, 83% of Arizona's legislative districts lean either so far Democrat or so far Republican that the only election that's of any consequence is the primary. Now, the primaries are not well participated in. It's usually about, I think it's about 35% of Arizonans actually vote in the primary, but they're the ones that make the decision. Now, so there in 2022, you got my second bullet. Less than 25% of eligible voters participated in the primary election. In addition, independents are kind of left out of this. Now, independents face some additional barriers. We have in Arizona what's called a modified open primary, which means independents can participate, but they must request either a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot in order to do so. Now, if you go to the poll, that's not too bad. But if you vote by mail, which 85% of Arizonans do, then you have to take that extra step to order your ballot ahead of time. And that's an obstacle that kind of interferes a little bit with the independents getting to vote. The other problem that independents have is because the two parties tend to dominate so specifically, and those partisan primaries have participation that tends to be very, very partisan, they often look at the candidates for either side and don't really want either one. So they can't find a candidate they really want to support. They have to take extra steps in order to participate. And so it's not a big surprise that often they don't. They should, but they don't. Okay. So here's the problem. 34% independents represent 34% of the electorate. They represent over a third. Okay. But 9 out of 10 don't participate in the primary. Now, all of us, regardless if you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, participate in these partisan, pay for these partisan primaries, but we don't get to participate in all of them. If I'm a Republican, I don't get to have any say about any Democratic candidates at all. I have only the Republican choices. If you're a Democrat, you have only the Democratic choices. You don't get to choose or separate down ballot. And if you're an independent, well, you got to pick one or the other. And you don't get to say, well, I want to vote for this Republican in this race and this Democrat in this race. You don't get to do that. Now, here's the other problem. Now, independents, if you're an independent candidate, you have to gather between 2 and 6 times as many signatures to get on the ballot as a member of the parties. I was shocked by that, and I taught civics for 10 years, and I had no idea. But it's true. For example, if you look at, I can't think of her name, Kirsten Sinema. Kirsten Sinema was going to run, right? She was an independent. She was going to run for Congress again. She switched over. If she had wanted to run for Congress, she would have had to gather over 40,000 signatures to get on the ballot. Ruben Gallego would have had to gather 6,500 because he was a Democrat. And Carrie Lake, about 7,000. Okay, so there's a disproportionate kind of unfairness there. So that's a problem that we see. Okay, so what is broken here? Well, we think there's parts broken in all 3 areas. First of all, to get on the ballot, you have these unequal signature requirements. And many candidates choose not to run because they don't think they can win. If you're Kirsten Sinema, you might have enough name recognition to get enough signatures. But for the average independent, gathering that many signatures is an overwhelming thing. And that's one of the reasons we've never had an independent elected to the Arizona state legislature ever. In the primaries, 83% of the elections are decided in the primary, where less than 25% of voters participate. And independents have obstacles that drop their participation significantly. We all pay for these, but we don't all get to participate in all of them equally, okay? And finally, by the time we get to the general election, so many of our districts are safe. For example, in the 2022 elections, we have 30 legislative districts here in Arizona. For the state Senate, 8 of them, when they got to the general, 8 candidates ran unopposed, okay? Because they were, once they'd won the election for their party, nobody else was going to bother because it was such a shoe-in at that point. So we have a problem there. Most people only vote in the general election, but they don't really have a lot of choices. How many times have you gone to the poll and looked at the 2 possibilities and went, I don't like either one of these people, right? So what do? You choose the lesser of 2 evils. And that's not a way we should be voting. We should be able to vote for somebody we think is going to represent us and do a good job, not for, gee, I don't like either one, but that guy's worse, okay? But how often do we do that? And we do that fairly frequently. As a result of this, and this system, 70% of Arizonans believe that our statewide and legislative elected officials are not focused on the issues we care most about. Think about what happens once we elect people, right? They've got to serve that partisan primary base. They've got to play to that base. And for those folks, oftentimes, those folks often see compromise as capitulation. if I work across the aisle, if my candidate works across the aisle and works with those other evil, if you're a Republican, it's the Dems. If you're Dems, it's Republicans. If they were willing to work across, those folks see that as a betrayal and they punish those folks in a primary. Now, the problem here is if you're going to solve any problems, you've got to be able to compromise. And right now, our system discourages that. So that's what I mean with I think there's an issue with the system. Okay? So, what is our solution? What we're proposing is something called final five voting. Now, final five voting makes up three parts. You remember those three dots that we had going across? Well, we want to make a small change in each area. If you look at our stool here, it's like the legs of a three-legged stool. Now, you could pass each of these reforms individually, and it might help. But if we do this all together, then we get that really kind of synergistic effect that would really maybe make some real improvements. Okay. Now, those three changes are equalizing signatures for all candidates, creating a truly open primary, and then what we want to do is move the top 5 vote getters in that open primary to the general election where we use ranked choice voting. And I'll explain how that works and why we want to do that. Okay. So our first step, equalize the ballot signatures for everyone. In voter's choice, we believe that it shouldn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, an independent or libertarian or green. Doesn't matter. Whatever the percentage that is required for a candidate to get on the ballot in their district should be the same for everyone. Okay? And then we think it's that simple and that fair. Now, right now, it's not that way because it's seen as independents not having to compete in a primary. But independents not being able to compete in a primary loses them a lot of free media that they would get. And so it just makes it harder. Okay. So that's a thought. So that one is pretty straightforward. Most people look at that and go, yeah, I didn't know that. That seems pretty straightforward. Let's make that fair. The second change we would push is the creation of a truly open primary. A primary in which all voters, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green, Independent, are able to vote. And all candidates, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, Green, whatever, are able to vote. So everybody runs on the same ballot. Our goal here is to separate what we call contenders from pretenders, right? The folks who are really going to be sort of competitive from the folks who are, well, just not. Okay. Now, how would that work? All right. So all candidates would be placed on one ballot, all qualified candidates. That means those who met the signature requirement in their district, right? All registered voters would receive that ballot and vote for their single choice. Now, if you will look at the ballot I've got on the right-hand side of the screen, this is a ballot from an open primary, okay? And if you kind of squint, you can see that it lists the party preference under each name. We don't have a problem with them listing their party preference. We just want everybody to be able to compete in the primary, right? So you have Matthew Cinquenta right there, party preference none, he's an independent. Raul Rodriguez Jr., party preference, well, he's a Republican, and on down, okay? Now, in this primary, you would vote exactly like you always have. You would pick the person you like best, right? I like this guy. Right? In this case, you'd say, okay, I like Matthew Cinquenta, right? Great, you're done. But what we would do here is we would take the top 5 vote getters and advance them to the general election. So whoever got the top 5 votes, so let's say you have a primary with 7 or 8 candidates on it. Well, first of all, you've got some real choice, but there's also likely some folks out there who they're probably not going to get it, right? So by moving forward the top 5 vote getters, then you put a general election where voters get to have some real choice, and it limits it down. Now, This is done in Alaska. They do it a little bit differently. They move forward 4. In California, they do the same thing, but they move forward 2. Theirs is the top 2 system, and it's a little different, but it's been done in a couple of places. Okay. Then we get to the general election. And in the general election, we want to use something called ranked choice voting. Now, ranked choice voting is talked about some and misunderstood a lot. So I'm going to kind of guide you through how it works. Okay. So this that you have right in front of you is a ballot from Maine. Maine instituted ranked choice voting a couple, 3 election cycles ago. I don't remember exactly. But this is an example from them. And so they had 4 candidates here um, on their ballot. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my pen here, which is really cool. And I'm going to say, we're going to talk about William Hoare. And you'll notice William Hoare is an independent. Okay. Now, maybe you really like William Hoare, right? You think he's got great ideas. Now, in the past, or at least under the current system, you may be sort of discouraged from voting for William Hoare because he's an independent. Because let's face it, independents don't tend to win. And if you did vote for him, you might worry that you're going to accidentally throw your vote away or give it to somebody or inadvertently help someone who you really don't want, right? So with ranked choice voting, we move past that because you can pick the candidate you like best, and then you can pick a candidate, a backup who you think can win if your first choice gets eliminated. So it gives you more say to vote your actual conscience. So for example, I'm going to go ahead over here and I'm going to vote for William Hoare. And my little pen is small, but you get the idea. Okay. And then I'm going to say, well, let's pretend I lean more Democratic. Okay. So I'm going to say then, well, if William Hoare can't get it, I'm going to vote for Jared Golden. And then I could stop at that point. I could just vote one. This is the voter choice. Nobody makes you decide how many candidates you rank, but you do get to rank them. I'm going to say I like Tiffany Bond next. Okay. And then I really dislike that Republican. Okay. And my apologies to Republicans out there. I switch it up as I do this. But maybe you just don't choose that person. Okay. And you just stop there. Now, if you wanted to write Palanquin or you wanted to write in a write-in candidate for 4th and put Palanquin 5th, that is your choice. You could do that. Okay. But you get one choice, one candidate for each choice. Ranked choice voting from a voter's perspective is not any different from buying ice cream. My wife will send me to the store and tell me, okay, Mark, I want you to go to the store and get ice cream. Get vanilla. But if they don't have vanilla, get chocolate. If they don't have chocolate, okay, I can live with peppermint. But remember, I'm allergic to pistachio. Okay. And that's really what we do. We rank things all the time. So from the voter's perspective, this is from filling out the ballot, this is incredibly simple. And it gives you a lot more choices and a lot more ability to vote your actual conscience. Okay, that brings us to how is it counted? Now, this is how it is counted. The important thing to understand about ranked choice voting, and one of its big benefits, is that a candidate cannot win a ranked choice voting election without a 50% +1 majority. Now, that's not the way we do things right now. Right now, we have a first past the post system, or what's called the winner take all. And you can have, if you have a ballot with multiple candidates, you can elect a candidate who gets maybe 35% of the vote or 27% of the vote. As long as they have more than everybody else, then that's okay. Oftentimes we want to have a majority and we'll do a runoff election. Well, runoffs are great, but they have very low participation and they cost a lot of money. City of Phoenix did one for its current mayor a couple of election cycles ago. And they had half the turnout on the runoff and spent an extra $1 million. Ranked choice voting does this instantly and for no cost. So let me show you how it works. Here we have candidate E. Candidate E has the most votes, right? But they haven't achieved a 50% plus one majority. Now, candidate A down here, well, they have the least. So how do we do this? Well, what's going to happen here is very straightforward. Candidate A is going to be eliminated. And the folks who voted for candidate A, their second choices are going to be looked at and considered. Okay, so A is going to go away, but you're going to see on the bar graph where the voters who voted for A, what their second choices were. So here we go. And there it is. So A is gone. Goodbye, A. E picked up a few. D picked up a few. C picked up a few. Poor B didn't get any. Okay. So now we're looking here and we're looking at B. Well, B now has the fewest. E is not yet at a majority. So B is going to be eliminated. The folks who voted for B, their second choice is going to be considered. And we eliminate B. There goes B. And you can see at this point, with that allocation, with that consideration of what B's second choices were, we went ahead and pushed E to a 50% plus one majority, and we have a winner. At this point, we don't rank anymore. Now, if a candidate earns 50% on the first round, we do not rank at all because they already have a majority and we're done. Okay. So what are the benefits of this? Well, there are multiple. One, this is just a few, provides voters with more choice. You don't have to pick that lesser of two evils option, right? If we push 5 forward, and then you can choose the one that best meets your conscience and a backup, and you're not discouraged for voting what you really want to, you no longer have this fear of your vote being thrown away. That gives everybody more choices. It ensures that the winner has a majority. It stops something called the spoiler effect. Sometimes we have that where you have a third-party candidate. That's one of those reasons why we have that second choice. So you can vote for what you want. You don't have the risk of one pulling away from one of the front runners. I'll come back to that later. My favorite part of this is it provides a natural disincentive for negative campaigning. That's one of the reasons I got so involved in this, is I got so tired of how negative our elections are and how much division they sow. In an election where you have multiple candidates, it is extremely difficult for one person to earn a 50% plus one majority on the first ballot, which means that candidates have to campaign beyond their base. They have to seek out actively those second and third choice votes. If they badmouth their opponent, they risk alienating those their opponent's supporters, and they risk those second and third choice votes, and they don't want to do that. So what you get is a much more civil discourse and an attempt to kind of work together and say, well, this candidate B is a great choice. I'd like to be your backup. Now, in Minneapolis, a couple of years ago, they had a mayoral race. I can never say that word. And they did a survey, and they used ranked choice voting. They did a survey afterwards, and they found that 90% of respondents said that there was little or no negative campaigning in that race, and that they think that was ranked choice voting that made that difference. I don't think anybody would tell you that it will always be sunshine and butterflies, but we think it might make it better. So what's our result here? Well, we get better results if we have more candidates participate from the get-go. If we equalize signature requirements and we get more candidates willing to participate in the election, we have more choices. If we truly open the primary, we'll get more competition among candidates, and we're going to get more participation among voters. If we remove those obstacles for independents and give them some real choices, they're going to be far more likely to participate. More importantly, This makes candidates accountable not just to their small partisan base, but to their whole of their electorate, right? The whole of their constituency, because they need not just their small little chunk, they've got to compete amongst the whole constituency. Finally, we had a general election. If we put 5 forward, we have far more choices on the ballot, no more lesser of two evils. We'll get more positive campaigns because ranked choice voting actively discourages negative campaigns. Winners would be incentivized to solve problems because they are held accountable by all of their constituency, not just a small partisan base. And they know that if they reach across the aisle to help or compromise or come up with a solution, while they may lose some of their support on their base, they may pick up other support elsewhere, and there's not such a risk of them being primary. Okay? Hopefully, as a result of that, we get more efficient and effective government, and as a result, we get better results for everyone. Now, Voter Choice Arizona does not have any initiatives on the ballot this election. There is one on the ballot that would do 2 of the 3 things we're seeking. The Make Elections Fair Act, it's also known as Proposition 140. It would enact equal signatures and create an open primary. But it leaves the decision of how many candidates move forward from that open primary to the state legislature. The state legislature would decide if 2 move forward, or 3 move forward, 4 or 5. They would decide how that goes. Now, it's not perfect. We don't think it's perfect, but we think it's a step in the right direction. So we recommend signing and supporting this initiative. For Voter Choice Arizona, this is how we are proceeding forward. Here in 2024, we're going to go ahead and support the Make Elections Fair initiative because it equalizes signature requirements and establishes open primaries. We are also trying to oppose Propositions 133, 34, 36, and 37. 133 would enshrine the current system as it is forever. And we don't want to do that because we think the system needs to change. 134 and 136 makes changes in how citizens' initiatives are brought to the ballot and makes it far more difficult to do that. And 137 has to do with ending judicial retention elections. And we're voter choice, so we believe in having more choice for voters. So we're going to naturally oppose that. I have a separate presentation. If I'd love to come back as Better Ballot, this is more of our political arm, and talk more about that. So, if you'd like to have me back, let me know. Here in 2026, our goal is to pass a truly Final 5 proposition, like I just explained, with all 3 parts, and make it a part of Arizona's Constitution and move us forward at that point. Okay. Now, this brings me to my last page. If you are interested in learning more, you can contact us at 2 places. We have Voter Choice Arizona, which is the organization that puts on this program. We are sort of our educational arm. We teach people about Final 5 ranked choice voting. You're welcome to volunteer, make a donation. We are a 501(c), tax deductible, whole 9 yards. We also have a brand new website, and this is through our sister organization called Better Ballot Arizona. It's called Protect Arizona's Voice, and it has to do with opposing some of the ballot propositions I talked to you about. And you can click on that QR code and check out that link there. And that will conclude my presentation. I'm going to go ahead and close the screen for a second so I can see you while I talk to you. If I can actually get to somewhere I can stop. There we go.
Oh, good, you did it. All right, excellent. All right.
Okay.
Well, there
Go
have been
ahead.
a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to go back and start at the very beginning. Let me see. Was there anything else? Somebody gave a great book suggestion. Sally recommended a book called, or I don't know if it's a book or an article, Politics Industry: How Political Innovation Can Break Partisan Gridlock and Save Our Democracy by Catherine Gell and Michael Porter. So that sounds like a great recommendation. That's very
That
on
is an
topic.
that is an excellent book, and is that book that a lot of our ideas are based on. Is that same kind of thinking. So they're pushing both either Final Four or Final Five, and they argue, this is a grassroots up. Each state needs to kind of come up with what works for them. But it's a good starting point. Go ahead, Gene.
So here's one from our legal director, Diane Post, also Arizona legend, Diane Post. She says, problem is that the legislature or Secretary of State in default decides how many to put on the ballot. They might not put 5, but put twice the open seats, making no ranked choice is possible statewide. Can you please address that criticism?
I can, absolutely. The reality is, I think we believe that Make Elections Fair is a step in the right direction. I don't think it is an end point. Um, yes, nobody can really control what the state legislature will do. It is in the Make Elections Fair, and I'm not a Make Elections Fair guy directly, but I'm pretty familiar. Is that they do have it so the state legislature simply decides not to. They ignore it. Then the Arizona Secretary of State would be deemed to make a decision, and that's mostly just to keep the legislature from just ignoring it. They could. I think there's a fear that they would do just a top 2, and there's some criticism of that. But I do think that sometimes we want perfection right away, and we don't always necessarily get there. And in a democracy, things happen in small chunks. I think what makes the idea of Make Elections Fair such a potent idea is how strongly it is being opposed by the powers that would be most affected by it. And that's going to be, here in Arizona, that tends to be the Republicans because they have the most power. Nevada, you should know, passed this idea a couple years ago. Now, Nevada is a unique kind of state because in order to amend their constitution, it has to pass twice in 2 separate elections. So it's actually coming up for election again for them this year. The main opponents there were the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party was the one that benefits most from the current system. Right. So I'm sure, leaving it to the legislature, I think that was done on fact because polling for ranked choice voting is not nearly as strong, or at least when we started this way back a year ago, as open primaries and equalizing signatures. Equalizing signatures polls extremely well because people get it. It's logical. Mm-hmm. Open primaries is pretty straightforward and logical. Ranked choice voting is not hard, but it's very different. Mm-hmm. And people are learning about it, and there's some misinformation. But I think we need to do a better job of educating. So that's why I'm here, and hopefully we would bring that around to the point that we would get that. No matter what happens, voter choice is going for an initiative next election. So we're going to say we support Make Elections Fair because it takes steps in the right direction. And I think holding representatives accountable to all of their electorate in the primary rather than just a very small section is a step forward regardless. Equalizing the signature and getting the partisan primary put away with and creating an open primary are good first steps, but I don't think we're done. It's just a good first step. So that's why we support it.
And I think, I appreciate this so much because, I've seen some of these, advocacy nonprofit organizations who have varying opinions about this ballot initiative that's coming up. And in fact, like I said earlier, we've got the League of Women Voters. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't checked out their stance. I do know Civic Engagement Beyond Voting is only supporting the AAA ballot initiative, the Abortion Access for All. but we are a nonpartisan organization and we're here to provide that information. So I'm so glad that we're going to be getting probably varying opinions about this. And I have a couple of comments that really go right along with what you just said, especially about here in Arizona and in Nevada, because Erica, who's a wonderful activist in her own right in Arizona politics, she says extremist Republicans in the legislature keep pushing bills to make ranked choice voting illegal. They are clearly very afraid of it. I think they fear the moderation of politics and want it to stay extreme. But then Diane came back and said both Democrats and Republicans sued against this initiative. So they're both scared. And you're right, like it depends on the political climate of your state. And this, I feel like, habit that we've developed of like, it's almost like a sports team. Rah, 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 Democrats, rah, 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 Republicans, and the poor independents are just sitting there in the bleachers saying, well, what about me?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it is not just independents sitting in the bleachers. I think you have moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans who are shaking their heads going, something's very, very wrong here. Because what we're ending up with in terms of candidates is it's in either an absolute left or an absolute right. And there's a lot of ground in between where, and I've always thought this, and this is one of the things that got me. I used to work with a guy, and I'll give away my politics a little bit. I was more of a conservative guy, and he was very much more of a liberal Democratic guy. And we probably on stat didn't agree on a lot of things, but we could sit down, the two of us together on normal issues and talk it out and figure it out and compromise. Okay, I'll give up on this and you give up on that. Well, and that's how solutions are created. That's how government in a democracy with a broad spectrum of opinion has to work. We have to have the ability to compromise and work together. But into the current system, the leadership from either side will poo-poo and punish, frankly,
demonize, even
legislatures
demonize.
who will attempt to work across the aisle or not refer to the other side as just evil. I've talked to Dems, I talked to Republicans. You know what? They're all people. They talk to about their grandkids. Okay, it's we have this system, and in part the parties benefit. I believe this is me, not voter choice, from stoking anger and fear. Because the more they can badmouth and stoke anger and fear, the more donations they make. Let's face it, they can get people fired up. The more votes they turn out, the more donations they get, and that's nice, but it's not solving the problems that we're facing.
Mm-hmm. So here's another really good question coming from Jay. He wants to know, in ranked choice voting, ideally, how are the candidates listed on the ballot? Are they in alphabetical order?
That's a really good question. I hadn't thought of that one. But I think, yes, I think generally what they would do is list them alphabetically.
Yeah. I mean, I know too, like, yeah, in Arizona, I think that they randomly decide what the order will be in different precincts. So you might get a ballot that has a Democrat at the top. You might have one at the Republic. I don't really know exactly, but
yeah, that's something I'd have to look more into. My understanding is it's usually just done alphabetically. To me, that would be the most fair way, but I haven't looked in that question specifically. It's a very good question.
Okay. So this question comes from Stephen, or Stefan. I think it's Stephen. I'm not sure. But he says, I think ranked choice voting is particularly good in elections like city council elections where there are multiple candidates for, say, 5 seats. Groups of voters who are in a minority can still, hold on, sorry. Groups of voters who are still in a minority, who are in a minority can still have their candidates elected. Our previous city, Cambridge, Massachusetts, has been doing ranked choice voting for decades. So that's, I guess, more of a comment than a question.
Well, I mean, and Maine has been doing this a while. Maine was kind of the front runner in this, and their system is a little different. They keep their partisan primaries, and I believe they even use ranked choice voting in their partisan primaries. So it's a little bit different than what we're proposing, but it's, I think no matter who you are, if you're looking at our current system, my only thing is be open-minded to let's try something different. That's kind of how I approach this. And that's what I get when I canvass people. It's like, I don't know about this, but we've got to do something. And I think ranked choice does. It at least gives folks who would support minority candidates a voice. So often they're kind of squished out of the way by the two dominant parties. So even if they are not directly electing their candidate, they still can vote for the candidate they most want and then vote that back up. So they still have some say and are not just ignored.
Okay. We have a bit of a lively discussion here, and I don't really actually, I don't really want to get into it, but basically the comments are, we've got different organizations like League of Women Voters, Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. They're coming out against, he's disappointed by it, right? This is David speaking.
Yeah, I see.
And then Mary is coming back and saying, I cannot support a proposition that gives the legislature final say in how many people will be on the final ballot. Again, I don't want to get in the weeds here. It's pretty clear, Mark, your position on this. This is an incremental step for us to maybe be able to expand beyond what this this ballot initiative is. So this is not we know where Mark is. Apparently people know where League of Women Voters and the other organization stands. This is your opportunity to suss it out for yourselves. But there's so many questions here that I just want to get to them. Let's see. Philip, I think this is more of a comment, but if top 5 voting and ranked choice voting is implemented, then voters will need to have a better understanding of the candidates and their positions and issues. What measures would need to be taken to ensure that, okay, hold on. Come on, let me scroll here. Why can't I see what it says? That voters are adequately informed. So what measures would need to be taken to ensure that voters are adequately informed so that they can make informed decisions in the voting booth?
Okay, I'm not seeing that question here. So could you just say that one more time so I
Yeah,
make sure I got it?
they're just saying if these things are passed, if these things are implemented, then voters will need to have a better understanding of the candidates and their positions on issues. What measures would need to be taken to ensure that voters are adequate? You know what, honestly, Phil, I feel like that's up to the candidates. Because what you said, Mark, is that this system would force people to speak to people across the aisle, to go to their, when they're canvassing at doors, they're not strictly going to be, speaking into an echo chamber. They're going to be knocking on doors of, of the opposite party and stuff like that. So it would incur, in my opinion, this would be what he's asking is, what do candidates need to do? Well, they need to get out there and actually talk to people and talk about issues without the fear mongering. Right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
if I may, there's a film out, and we're trying to get it screened, and hopefully, I'm trying right now. If I get it locked in an actual date, I'll send you information. There's a documentary called Majority Rules, and it is a documentary on the Alaskan system and the Alaskan experience. And couple different things. They did a state senator from Alaska who first opposed Final Five voting and then went on for it. And I'm afraid I cannot remember her name. But I saw her interviewed, and her comment was, what happened is I went from, they get a list, right? There's all these polling lists, and they can get a list of these are these are your folks who vote in this house, and you go to them, and these are who you talk to be able to get into part of the primary. And she said, when they passed this, that list didn't mean anything anymore. I went and talked to every door. I knocked on door after, and I talked to Republicans, I talked to Democrats, I talked to independents, I talked to everybody. And it really changed her perspective. Paul Johnson talked about, he came to one of our events and is a big supporter. He said, I was a Democrat. And what I found out when I started looking in this and really talking to people is I always wanted these social programs, but I came to the realization that you have to have a vibrant business community to support those kinds of social programs. So there needs to be a conversation going each way. And so getting candidates out of their echo chamber and getting them out to actually talk to people is a big benefit here. The other thing I want to address is that there is an educational component that will be necessary when we do this. If we get this passed, we have to teach people how to do it. Alaska did a fabulous job. So we have got a great blueprint. They went through and they spent some money, and it'll cost, the cost is there. It's not excessive, but you need to spend some money to teach people. And their surveys came back that and I can't quote exactly, but a very large majority said they found the system very easy to use. and it worked for them. Now, of course, there are those who don't agree with that, but at least the polling that I've seen saw most Alaskans, but that wasn't too bad at all. They explained it to us and we did it and it was fine. So we'll see.
Okay, so, well, first of all, I want to point out a comment by Whit. Whit is our board president for Secular AZ, and this is a great suggestion. How about we flip the legislature and do this right without the poison pill of the legislature inserting themselves into the process? And then he asked why that provision was added. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know if you do, Mark.
I think I can pitch it. It had to do with polling. I think it really did. The idea was that open primaries and equalizing signatures polled extremely well, and we're seeing like, well, they can pass this, and ranked choice voting didn't. Not so much that it was very opposed. There was a large section of 30% opposed, and there was a section of about 25 or so that supported, and then there was a huge unknown section of people who just said, I don't understand enough. I don't know enough about this. And I think the decision was made of, let's get through what we can get through first, and then we can come back and attack it later. And I don't know if I agree with that strategy, but I think that was the thinking behind it of, we've got to get something through. This is what we can get through. And the sad part is, I think you see other organizations like Civic Engagement Beyond Voting coming back and going, well, now we don't like that either. So the truth is, you can't please everybody. And, but if we want to make forward progress, we may have to make it a little bit incrementally. And sometimes you don't get everything you want on the first go. That doesn't mean we stop. That means we get this, we have a great party, and then we go back to work the next day, and we work until 2026 until we can get it where we really want it. But it's a step, and it's obviously a step because if you look at how many people are fighting so hard to stop it because they're afraid of it.
One thing I want to point out, and then we'll kind of close out because it is 12:58 and I want to honor everybody's time. But one thing I want to point out, because you talked about, engineering and how, when strong systems, if weak systems are in place, it disenfranchises people, basically, is kind of what I heard you say. And I've known a lot of software engineers in my day, and across the board, they all say this whole question of gerrymandering could seriously be solved by software automation. We could very easily take a look at our legislative districts and, evenly come up with boundaries so that every district is a competitive district, right? Like, so that there is a fair shot for everybody. So, have you thought about that at all, about the idea, instead of a bunch of human beings who have biases that they bring to the table, mapping out these districts and carving out little sections for themselves? Have you ever looked into the idea of, engineering when we redistrict every census year, right? Have you ever looked into that?
Well, we're supposed to have an independent voting commission. How independent that voting commission is, I don't know, and I can't speak to. There are a lot of problems that we could solve. Voter choice is chosen to focus just on this particular one.
Gotcha.
Yes, redistricting is an issue. Gerrymandering is an issue. So is dark money and some of these other things. But no single organization can tackle all of that. So we are very much focused on just getting through Final Five because we believe that that is the lever that leads to other things. Because if we can make our politicians accountable to all of us and not just a partisan base and encourage them to work together, we're going to get farther along with some of these other things as well. I'm going to repost my virtual sign-in sheet. If I
Yeah,
can.
please do. Yeah. I got to
I was
tell
trying
you, Mark, you remind me of, I had a great teacher in high school. His name was Joe Long. He was also our advisor for our class from freshman to senior year. And he was the kind of social studies teacher. He taught civics and econ. And you just, some of my teachers, you could tell which way they leaned, but Mr. Long, you never could. And I
Mhm.
swear, even though he was a bit of a curmudgeon, and you're not, I'm not saying that. I learned so much
I
from him.
am.
So I just feel like your kids, your students, probably learn an awful lot from you. And the fact that you are teaching them about civility in politics, like I'm looking forward for the day for you to return to our classrooms because we need good teachers like you. So
Well, thank you.
one question that I ask our speakers every Friday is, in these troubled times, Mark Cable, what gives you hope?
Young people, always. 60% of 18 to 24-year-olds are coming out and they're registering as independent. They're not registering with either party. They're looking at the two systems and going, this isn't working. There's something, I don't like either one of these. So that's it, because kids are honest with you, and if you explain things to them, they will listen and they'll make up their own mind, and they may not be what you think, but they will at least give it a hearing. And I think that's the kind of area where we need to be in, as a society as a whole. Of you're welcome to have your opinion, and you should, and have the values you believe in, but you've got to be open to hearing other ideas and at least listening to them respectfully. Um, I'm hoping at some point we get away from some of the vulgarity in our politics, because I think we're losing good people who would take part in the system to do their civic duty because they simply don't want to get blasted and painted and have their reputation sullied, um, and it's not worth it to them. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of folks on the bench that if we could get it to be more civil, could come in and could do some really good things.
Yeah. Well, you just made me miss being in a classroom. I yearn for the day that teachers are paid a fair wage and we have regular sized classes of like maybe 25 kids or less in our classrooms.
That would be nice.
Wouldn't it
I
be
doubt it.
nice?
I doubt it, but
I'm not going to hold my breath. And I think that Whit is probably right that we all need to get out there and work on flipping our legislature. And of course, pay attention to your school board meetings, for crying
yeah.
out loud, so we can keep hiring good teachers like Mark Cable. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. I appreciate you. I appreciate your passion so much, and the fact that your students led you on this path. Like, it's really great. I hope you have
Well,
a wonderful weekend, Mark.
well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. If you'd like to learn more, please sign in on my virtual sign-in sheet. I'd love to come back and talk more about ballot propositions sometime before November if you'd have me. But I know you're getting good stuff from the League of Women Voters. They're good too. So
We
um,
know where you stand,
there you
okay? And
go.
we are nonpartisan, so we encourage everybody to look at every single outlet of information. So
Perfect. Perfect. Can't ask for more than that. Thanks. And that's great. Thank you so much for having me.
thanks, everybody. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday. Take care,
Thank you for
everybody.
the awesome questions. Thank you. And thank you for listening.
You're welcome. Take care.